By the time most Americans notice something is wrong with this summer, when the grocery bill climbs, when the heat settles in and doesn't lift, when the storms keep coming from the same direction, the window to understand why will already be closing. Because the reason is not complicated. It is atmospheric. Something locked over this continent, and it locked weeks ago. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly what the models are showing, why June is already decided, and what it means for the food, the heat, and the storms hitting the central United States right now. A continental-scale atmospheric configuration has settled over the United States, and the federal agencies that track these things, the ones whose job it is to say nothing until they are certain, have confirmed it will hold through at least the middle of June. That is not a forecast with error bars. That is a commitment. And what it means is that the food, the heat, and the storms hitting the central United night are not random. They are the output of a single, decided system. The question is not whether this is happening. The question is what it does before it finally breaks. To understand what that means, you have to understand what it means for a pattern to lock. The atmosphere is always moving. Ridge building here, trough dropping there, a jet stream meandering north then south in a constant negotiation with the ocean and the sun. That movement is what resets the system. A heat dome builds for a few days, then a cold front breaks it. A dry stretch settles in, then a storm track arrives and resets the soil. The whole system is restless by design, and that restlessness is what keeps any single extreme from compounding into something permanent. But occasionally, the wave pattern in the upper atmosphere stalls. The ridges and troughs stop migrating. The jet stream gets pinned. When meteorologists talk about an atmospheric configuration locking in place, they mean the steering currents that normally move weather systems across the country have essentially stopped doing that. Whatever is sitting somewhere stays there. But here's the thing. What stalls is not neutral air. What is stalled over the central United States is a dome of high pressure with no exit route and no competition. The clock started weeks ago. Here's what that dome is doing. High pressure suppresses cloud formation. It suppresses convection. It keeps moisture from pooling long enough to produce the kind of rainfall that would count. Soil that was already thin on water starts to bake from the surface down. Crops in early growth stages hit stress thresholds before the plant has the root depth to compensate. Reservoirs that were already drawn down go lower. And because the dome is not moving, there is no natural break built into the forecast. This is the basic physics, and it plays out on a timetable that is faster than most people expect, and faster than most maps can track. The Climate Prediction Center has now issued an explicit Rapid Onset Drought watch for the central United States. The word rapid is doing significant work in that phrase. Standard drought is a slow accumulation of deficits. Weeks of below-average precipitation stacking up until the official index crosses a threshold. Rapid onset drought is different. It can develop in 2 to 3 weeks. It skips several stages of the normal progression. Soil moisture drops faster than the drought monitors can update, which means by the time the maps catch up to what is actually in the ground, the damage to agriculture and range conditions is already weeks old. Which means if you are waiting for the official drought map to turn red before you act, you are already behind. The central United States is one of the most agriculturally exposed regions on the planet for exactly this kind of event. Winter wheat is approaching harvest across Kansas and Oklahoma. Corn is in early vegetative stages across Nebraska and Iowa. Cattle country from the Texas Panhandle to eastern Colorado is almost entirely dependent on natural rainfall. There is no irrigation backstop when the grass stops growing. A rapid onset drought arriving in late May and holding through June does not threaten a harvest. It ends one. And those losses do not stay regional. They travel down supply chains and show up in prices months later, in cities that never felt the heat. Meanwhile, along the edge of that high-pressure dome, the atmosphere is doing something else entirely. The Storm Prediction Center has flagged a multi-day severe weather corridor running through Friday. This is not a contradiction. It is the architecture of the system. High pressure to the west, a low pressure track to the east, and along the boundary between them. Wind shear, instability, and the atmospheric fuel for organized thunderstorm complexes. Tornadoes, large hail, damaging straight-line winds. The same pattern that is baking the Oklahoma Panhandle is feeding the storm engines one state over, pulling Gulf moisture northward and colliding it with that rigid western wall. That duality is one of the most disorienting things about a continental-scale atmospheric lock. On one side of the boundary, a wheat farmer in Woodward County is watching the soil crack. On the other side, A storm chaser outside Wichita is watching a wall cloud rotate. Both are inside the same system. The drought and the outbreak are not separate stories. They are the same story told in two different registers. And both of them are about to get worse before they get better. The heat is the next chapter. The global forecast system, the American numerical weather model that the National Weather Service runs twice a day, places the Oklahoma Panhandle at 104 degrees Fahrenheit by next Wednesday. The Oklahoma Panhandle sits above 3,000 feet in elevation. It is not Phoenix. It is not Death Valley. It is a high plains agricultural landscape where a temperature of 104 degrees represents an event well outside normal operating conditions. Livestock without shade begin to experience heat stress at temperatures far below that threshold. Workers in fields and feedlots face real physiological danger, not discomfort, danger. And the forecast is not showing relief. But the number that matters most is not the peak temperature on a single afternoon. It is the overnight low. Heat events become genuinely dangerous when the overnight temperature stays high enough that people and animals cannot recover. When lows stay in the upper 70s or low 80s across multiple consecutive nights, the accumulated physiological burden compounds faster than it can be reversed. Emergency rooms start to see it in the second and third day. Mortality statistics are tallied weeks later, and they almost always come in higher than the initial counts. And unlike a passing heat wave where one cooler night resets the clock, a locked pattern means those nights do not come. The federal forecast hierarchy, the Climate Prediction Center, the Storm Prediction Center, the Weather Prediction Center, all of them, does not issue watches and confirmed outlooks like this casually. These products exist on a tiered alert structure designed to separate background noise from genuine hazard. An explicit Rapid Onset Drought watch from the CPC means the modeling ensemble has converged. The signal is clean enough that the agency is staking its professional credibility on it, and these agencies do not do that lightly. When the watch goes out in writing, it means the internal debate is over. What comes next depends on two things: whether any disturbance manages to dislodge the upper-level ridge before it fully consolidates, and whether the storm track along the eastern edge delivers any meaningful rainfall to the transition zones before the soil moisture deficit becomes irreversible for the growing season. Right now, the models are not showing a meaningful ridge breakdown before mid-June. That is the window the CPC is watching. That is the window that separates a damaging month from a generational agricultural loss. The next 10 days are not recovery time, they are commitment time. For most Americans living outside the immediate impact zone, this plays out at a distance. First as a weather story, then as an agriculture story, then months later as a grocery price story. But for the farmers watching the sky over a wheat field in central Kansas, for the ranchers watching the grass color change in the Texas Panhandle, for the people who live and work outdoors across the Central Plains, there is no distance. The pattern locked. The forecasts are in. What the rest of June looks like is already written in the physics of the atmosphere sitting overhead right now. We will be tracking whether that ridge breaks before mid-June. Subscribe so you do not miss the update when the models shift.